Alright, so on the other day on Friday I gave you that pre-factoring worksheet. That was to be able to help us with this factoring polynomials that we're going to start today. We're going to be working on factoring for a couple of days, and we're going to focus most of our attention today on a certain type of polynomial. Right? So your pre-factoring, let's kind of look at that worksheet real quick. You had your pre-factoring worksheet. And let's kind of go over it real quick. Right. When you did your pre-factoring, you had the little column that said product, sum, and then numbers. And what I didn't tell you is there were a few on there that you couldn't make work. Right. There were a couple where you tried to figure out what the product and the sum was, and it just wasn't possible. And I'm sorry that some of you racked your brain on that and it just didn't work. Right. So on that worksheet, you had some, and I took a few off the worksheet, like 36 and negative 13, where you had to figure out two numbers that multiplied to give you 36, but add up to be negative 13. And so you had to think about what your signs were and how numbers, positive and negative numbers work. And so to be a product, they both had to be negative, right? So that way when I multiply them, I get the negative becomes a positive, but then when I add them, they're still negatives. Right? What we're going to do is we're going to build on that today, and so we're going to do things like put variables attached to it, and say I want to find two factors that multiply to give me a negative 15x squared, but add up to be a positive 2x. So now what you have to think about is you have to think about how variables work in terms of their exponents, and also how combining like terms works. So when I come up with these numbers, I still have to think of the coefficients. Like on the coefficient part, two numbers that multiply to give me negative 15 and add up to be 2, they have to be opposite signs now. Something like if I use a 5 and negative 3, but I can't just use 5 and negative 3. I also have this variable, right? And so what's going to happen is I need to split this variable and cut that in half so that each number has one of those variables attached to it. It's not going to work for us to put the x squareds only on one of them and none on the other, because to multiply them, if I do this, I am going to get an x squared, but the only way I can add these two is if they are like terms, and to be like terms, they both have to have an x. Otherwise, they can't add up to have the 2x. And so what we did last week, when we were doing area boxes or columns, it didn't really matter, was we were taking polynomials, like x minus 4 times x plus 7, and what we were doing was we were multiplying. Alright, so I'm going to do this little arrow. Right. So that way when you multiply, you're going one direction. And if I multiply those out, and I try to combine all of my like terms, I'm not going to show you all the work, I'm just going to write it down. I get x squared plus 3x minus 28. And so what we're going to do today is, instead of multiplying and getting those trinomials, we're going to start with the trinomial, and we're going to work our way backwards to figure out the two binomials that they came from, and that's called factoring. So when you have binomials, you have sets of parentheses. Multiplying gets you a polynomial, but today we're going to take a polynomial, we're going to go backwards. Right. So I've got a few different examples, and I'm going to kind of take you through the long route today, just because if I show you this technique now, then when it gets more complicated tomorrow, it will just be, you'll be able to build off of it and make it easier tomorrow. Right? So there's definitely a faster way to what we're going to do today, but I'll show you the shortcut to this later, so that way you can just not get confused with tomorrow. Right? So what we're going to work on today is, the first part of factoring is we want to be able to factor polynomials where a is equal to 1. Alright, so we're going to, like I said, have a few different notes on polynomial factoring, and so this is going to be the first step. If you look at the polynomial that I have, this x squared plus 3x minus 28, that's written in standard form. It's in descending order, and so our general form of a polynomial looks like this, where you have ax squared plus bx plus c. So what we're trying to do when we're factoring with a equals to 1 is we're having a coefficient of 1 in front of the x squared, and the b and the c are going to be any kind of crazy numbers I want, kind of like the pre-factoring worksheet. Right. So I'm going to show you a few. I think I have like 3 examples that are just general examples that I actually took off your pre-factoring worksheet, and then one that I took off of your homework. Right. So, for example, so this is example 1. I have the polynomial x squared plus 11x plus 24. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an area box so I can undo my area box. Right. Again, like tomorrow, this will make more sense when it's more complicated. Right. And so make yourself an area box, and I want you to do a 2 by 2, because my goal right now is to be able to get a binomial times a binomial, right? Just like it was up here when I multiplied, and I started with a binomial times a binomial. It's a 2 by 2, so I'm going to start with a 2 by 2. Right. So what I want you to do is I want you to put the x squared term in the first box, and then this last term, or your constant, in the bottom box. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing products and sums. Okay, so the first one I'm going to actually write out what the letters mean, and then we're going to shortcut it a bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking for the product of these 2 diagonals going downward. Okay, so I want to multiply these 2 boxes. And when I do that, I'm going to get a 24x squared. Okay. So it's very similar to like up here in this pre-factoring review where I wrote negative 15x squared, but I'm showing you how I'm getting that number now. And then what I want to do is I want to have a sum of the one in the middle. And the sum of the one in the middle, I'm going to have to make sure that these 2 boxes are like terms that add up to be the plus 11x. And so what I'm going to do is, instead of having the numbers side by side like this, I'm going to try to figure out what the coefficients are and put them in these boxes. Right. So to be like terms, they both are going to have an x. Right. So that's one thing. And then I just have to look at the coefficients and figure out 2 numbers I can multiply to get 24 but add up to be 11. Right. So I'm going to use 3 and 8. 3 and 8, because they multiply, and I can double check. Multiply to give me a 24x squared, add up to be 11x. So I'm just putting it in this diagonal so that way I don't have to run it off this direction. I'm just putting it in my box. And now you're going to factor the rows and the columns. Right? So if I look at what's happening going this direction, I'm looking at between these 2 boxes only, right? Between x squared and 3x, the only factor they have in common is an x. Right? So if they have an x in common, I'm kind of undoing my multiplication. I'm thinking about if I take an x out this direction, what number or what variable times itself is going to give me x squared. Same thing over here. X times something has to give me 3x, so I'm going to use the positive 3. Down in this box, I need x times something to give me 8x, so I'm going to use the positive 8. And I'm going to use my multiplying skills to just double check that I have the correct values on the outsides. Right? Because if I go through and I do my multiplying with my area box, the inside products should work if I multiply the 2 numbers I figured out on the outside. And what's going to happen now is this part is one binomial, and this gives me the other binomial. So I know that there's like shortcuts to it, but depending on how, if you've seen it before, when I go and I start putting really crazy numbers in there, it's going to be some way, this might be a little bit easier than a guess and check sort of thing. I mean, there are guess and checks and there's other techniques, but this is kind of the one I'm going to show you today. Right. And so we're going to do that a couple different times. Like again, it's going to get faster as you start doing them. Right. But again, it doesn't matter which order you write the binomials, as long as the x plus 8 is connected in one binomial and the x plus 3 in the other. So, I mean, I can put anything I want here. So x squared minus 6x minus 40. And again, my goal right now is to get a binomial times a binomial. That's what I want to do, so I'm just going to kind of put my little guide over there as what I plan to do. And I'm going to start my area box again. The area box is just organization to help you with your factoring. And so first term, the x squared, first box. Make sure the negative goes along with the 40 when you put it down in the bottom box. Otherwise, the signs are not going to be right when you're trying to factor. So I'll shortcut it a little bit, and I'll just write P for product. Has to give me a negative 40x squared. And the sum on this diagonal, when I go upwards, has to give me a negative 6x. So again, right now, you're always going to have, because it's x squared, you're always going to have an x in both these boxes. So your main focus right now is going to be the numbers that you multiply to get negative 40 and add up to be negative 6. So I'm going to use like a negative 10 and a positive 4. And it's always good to just double check, multiply it and add it and make sure that the product and the sum are the correct values. And now factor outward. X and x. When a is equal to 1, that's going to be an x and an x each time. So I would need a negative 10 in this box to make the product work for that upper right-hand corner. And I need this to be a positive 4 to make the products work along the bottom. And so my two binomials, x minus 10 times x plus 4. So there's one from your homework. It's problem number 17. So when you get your choice of what assignment, parts of your assignment you get to do, you just don't get to choose number 17 because I'm giving it to you. So this is number 17. It says 2k squared plus 22k plus 60. And so this is a problem where I want to be able to do the same technique, but I don't have a 1 in the front. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to factor the GCF. Meaning I need to check these coefficients in front, and I need to take out the factor that they have in common first. Otherwise, when I do my boxes, I'm going to end up with really large numbers that I don't really need to have. So if I look at all of these, they have a 2 in common. And so I'm going to factor out the 2 first. And that will make factoring the trinomial on the inside a lot easier. So once you take out the GCF, then the second thing that you want to do is you want to factor the set of parentheses. That's my next goal. So I'm going to use my area box technique because my final answer to this is going to have the 2 that's on the outside, but then I need to break up that trinomial into its own 2 little binomials also. So I'm going to kind of hold on to the 2. It's going to wait there, kind of like my dog sits outside the bathroom door, waits for me to come out. It's just going to sit there and wait, all right, so I'm done with my hair or whatever. So when you make your area box, all right, you're going to make your area box and you're only going to worry about this piece right here. That's the part that I'm trying to factor right now. Because I've already taken out the 2, so that's already done. Now whatever variable it gives you, if it gives you a k, everything has to be in terms of the k's. So product-wise, 30k squared with a sum of 11k. So again, same kind of idea. They both are going to get the k this time. And then I'm just going to use a plus 5 and a plus 6. And if I put my k's on the outside here, I can look at it, and I am kind of multiplying, but I'm doing it backwards. I'm just thinking about k times something to give me a plus 6k. And the same thing here, k times something. And now my binomials on the outside, I can put in my little guides that I already had.